That's great. So I would suggest we start on time, 1 minute later. So hello, everybody, and welcome to day number 4 of Knowledge Week. So after Monday, where we discussed about legal issues of trafficking in person, and Tuesday, we discussed about why gender matters and gender equality matters. We talked about access to justice of smuggled migrants. And today, we'll be talking with a very diverse panel and speakers about successful strategies and challenges of addressing the use of technology and innovation in the fight against trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. My name is Martin Hemi. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm also part of the knowledge development and innovation team that is responsible for organizing this Knowledge Week. I wanted to take the minute to thank you all for attending and for also showing your interest into the Knowledge Week and to exchange on the tools and all the knowledge that we have developed at UNODC. Early this morning, we reached over 600 registration for the week. Which is a great success. Thank you so much for everybody. Before we start the discussion, a few housekeeping rules, and we've already seen a few elements there. I would like to remind everybody to stay muted and have their cameras off. This will allow us to have more attention to the speakers. Of course, the exception is if you are a speaker or the moderator. But I would also like to tell you that you are more than welcome to use the chat for people that have access to the chat to ask your questions. We will try our best to come to the questions by the end of the session. We already have received a few very good questions that we try to address by the end of the hour today. But please use the chat function if you'd like. Last but not least, this session is recorded. The recording of the session will be made available on the website of the Knowledge Week that one of my colleagues will be sharing in the chat relatively soon. Before going into the topic, I would like to introduce you to our panel and to our speakers today. First, we have Felicity Jerry, who is an international lawyer and practicing academic specializing in international and domestic criminal law. She has a particular interest and expertise in the criminal and corporate responsibility for human trafficking, with a specific focus on how the use of digital technology can both combat and cause human rights abuses. She is admitted at the International Criminal Court, as well as at the KCS, which is the Kosovo Specialist Chamber in The Hague, but also admitted as a lawyer in England, Wales, and Australia, and a professor of legal practice at Deakin University, and honorable professor at Salford University. Hello, and thank you for joining, Felicity, and good evening to Melbourne, Australia.
Hello, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Well, greetings from Melbourne.
Next up, we have Sebastian Arevalo Sanchez. I'm just going to quickly change. He is the co-founder and CEO of Fundación Pasos Libres and the LATAM regional representative of the Trafficking Analysis Hub. He is also one Young World Ambassador, Fellow of the United States Institute of Peace, and Fellow of the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative. His area of expertise is corporate social responsibility and partnership building with the private sector, academia, and international cooperation for the development of innovative solutions and initiatives to disrupt human trafficking and forced labor. Sebastian was also recognized as one of the 100 Latin Americans who inspire and create a better future by Avianca magazine in 2019. Hola y buen día, Bogotá.
Good morning, Martin, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the invitation.
And last but not least, we have with us the winning team of the Data Jam Against Exploitation, which was an innovation and technology competition that was held earlier this year, the first nationwide innovation and technology competition held in Canada. And with us today is Brian Ray, Jared Murphy, and Matthew Nihus. They describe themselves as the team. It was called BioResist. So BioResist is a group of friends from the west coast of Canada who are passionate about abolishing human trafficking. We are a young team composed of students, practitioners of programming, software development, and the law. Recognizing that it is the demand for human trafficking that propels the industry forward, we focus our technological solution towards the eradication of demand for the purpose of protecting vulnerable population and resisting their commodification and exploitation. Hello and good morning to Vancouver. Very early good morning.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really happy to be here. Thank
you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
To introduce you to the topic of today, we would like to share you, if technology allows us, a short 3-minute video that explains the interlinkages between technology and trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. So if you allow us a minute, you should be able to see it.
Can your smartphone lead you into the hands of traffickers and smugglers, or can it bring you to safety? Is technology a tool in the hands of criminals, or can it be used against them? The reality is far more complex. Technology, and the internet in particular, provide new opportunities for law enforcement to combat serious crimes such as human trafficking and migrant smuggling. At the same time, criminals take advantage of new technologies to innovate and extend their operations into the virtual world. How criminals misuse technology for human trafficking and migrant smuggling. Smugglers and traffickers often use technology to market their services online, to access victims and migrants, to recruit them, coerce or control them. They can use technology to process payments through cryptocurrencies and informal value transfer systems outside the reach of police investigations. Technology gives traffickers and smugglers easier access to more migrants and victims through phones, emails, instant messaging, websites, and applications while maintaining their anonymity. Human traffickers may like, comment, chat, or ask to be friends to gather information that they subsequently can use to recruit or extort their victims. Victims are often deceived online and may share intimate information which is used to coerce them into exploitation. Technology further allows criminals to exercise virtual control over the victims. Control may include monitoring through GPS tracking or access and phone applications by deploying spyware. Smugglers use technology not only to procure their services to migrants, but also to remotely direct them or guide them to cross rough seas. Besides, technology is used by traffickers and smugglers in order to escape justice. What is misused by traffickers and smugglers can also be used for good purposes. Technology can be used against traffickers and smugglers. For example, chatbots, web crawlers, and data mining tools can help to reduce the presence of traffickers and smugglers online. Technology is not only about crime prevention. Technology can be victim-centered. It can also be used to support and protect victims of trafficking and smuggled migrants, for example, to reach and communicate with migrants in distress. Technologies are used to shield victims or witnesses from visual contact with the traffickers in court and to facilitate their social reintegration. Technology is a double-edged sword. It can be misused by criminals, but it can also be used to prevent the crimes, to help identify more victims of trafficking and protect smuggled migrants. It can support police investigations and prosecutors in building stronger cases against traffickers and smugglers and effectively trace their criminal assets. Would you like to know more about links between cybercrime, trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants? The differences and commonalities between trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants?
Thank you so much. This video that we just saw was developed as part of the Education for Justice initiative, and it is available in 6 languages, and is also available on our website and in the Education for Justice website. With this introduction, I would like to give the floor now to Felicity. So Felicity, we have heard in the video that technology and innovation can be a double-edged sword. So technology can be used against traffickers and smugglers in a good way to combat their presence online, but it can also be used by the traffickers or by states to cause human rights violation. Can you tell us a little bit more about this double-edged sword and tell us a little bit more about the dangers as well of using technology in this context?
Yes, of course. Speaking about innovation, I'm now not going to be able to properly use the share, so I'm very grateful for Zoe assisting me with that. I think it's really interesting to think about it as a double-edged sword. I try and think about it as a problem that works in three different ways. So what we really want to do, as we've said in the slide here, what we're talking about today is what might be successful. And in the context of innovation, what technology might be successful, but then what are the challenges? And those are challenges faced by law enforcement, for example. And then what are the obstacles? And the obstacles to, if you like, carte blanche or just using technology in a fight is that inevitably that the trafficked person or the smuggled migrant may well suffer doubly. Firstly, at the hands of the traffickers, and secondly, at the hands of the state. So we do have to think in a much more complex way about how to use technology to combat human trafficking, but at the same time, not to cause human rights abuses. Next slide, please, Zoe. I've tried to represent this visually. If we look at the red dot in the middle, we can think about perpetrators and victims, but you also have to think about those, what I'm calling the overlap, because that fitted in the dot points. But sometimes you have a victim perpetrator paradigm. So you might have a trafficked person who commits crime, and that person falls into the definition of perpetrator of a crime. It may not be the crime of human trafficking, but also a victim of human trafficking, so a victim of crime. So you've already got a very complicated scenario. The perpetrator of human trafficking, the trafficked person who is a victim of that trafficking, then you've got the trafficked person who may have committed a crime through the means and purposes of others. And law enforcement need to realise that trafficked persons can appear in more than one way. So technology, when we think about that double-edged sword, we've got the opportunities, sophisticated methods of using technology for education like the E4J project, using technology to enable victims to report their situation. But the challenges that come with that is it's highly invasive, and there isn't really a great deal of ethical control. You might have ethical approval for a research project. I'm willing to bet there's more research project in looking for ways to combat human trafficking than looking for ways to use technology to or to prevent technology being used by law enforcement. And we can think about strategies for investigation that can come with high levels of bias. That already especially if you're thinking about something like terrorism, so trafficked persons engaged in terrorist type activity, you might have high levels of bias towards certain types of the community, or in sex trafficking, high levels of bias towards women, and the way in which technology is used to investigate can be very invasive indeed. We can have dangers about assumptions or knee-jerk reactions. In a trial of mine, when I was defending, and actually that was a terrorism trial as well, but I'm not going to dwell on terrorism for too long. But one of the images used to try and infer that someone had an extreme ideology was an image of a female warrior from Islamic history who was the equivalent of Joan of Arc. Now, if I had Joan of Arc on my phone, would someone consider me to have an extreme ideology? So it's just an example how we can make dangerous assumptions about material that appears on people's phones. And obviously the risk, as I've already said, is that trafficked persons, particularly who commit crime, can suffer doubly, having their technology used to prosecute them, but also invading their data and privacy rights. The other problem is there's a real dominant strategy of silence in a police investigation. And once a trafficked person remains silent, particularly if they've committed some form of crime or immigration offence, or a smuggled person has visa issues, well, there's emerging research that that type of silence, known as the code of silence, is actually caused by investigations, and even more so when, for example, the police will take your phone than it may be in the past. Next slide, please. I'll go as fast as I can. So we've got to first of all think about innovation by perpetrators. So we've got traffickers and smugglers who recruit and use coercion through phones, email, instant messaging, websites, advertising. They might engage in grooming and exploitation, text and video chat, imaging exchange. I'm giving you some lists here. I'm not going to read everything, but at its extreme end, live streaming sexual abuse. Deception through social media, or deception face-to-face, but then facilitating someone to engage in, for example, transnational human trafficking. I was involved in a death penalty case where the trafficked person is on death row for taking drugs from one country to another. In fact, in her case, she is currently on a temporary reprieve, and there's a question about whether she gives evidence using technology from one country to another about her trafficked status. So there's been quite a lot of technology involved in her case. Traffickers and smugglers logistics is now almost totally using technology and cloud-based applications. I've given you a FIFO example there. That's fly in, fly out sex workers. And an example of a situation that I knew of where sex workers flew in, were controlled totally by an iPad, and then fly out again, never to be seen. So technology in the flights and the flight bookings, and in the control, the spyware on that iPad in terms of appointments. Other uses are opportunities, so inviting for modelling and then threatening people with those modelling images, and of course massive use of technology in the context of business profit and money laundering. Next slide, please. So then we think about innovation by law enforcement. The immediate reaction is fantastic, let's see how the police can use this to catch traffickers, and they might use web disruption by fake profiles or chatbots to speak to multiple abusers online, and web crawlers, so that the police can maximise their effect on the internet, and looking at patterns of use of the internet and identifying links using telephones or telephone traffic, database queries, in database queries and data analysis, surveillance using border and street technology and drones, finance, mining people's financial records, health records, and then storing it, information storing, databases, and the difficulty for people understanding how long their records are going to be kept for, or what access they'll have to that, whether it's whether it's material that is held for public interest reasons, or it might even be shared with other countries. So states, police forces really trying to investigate, suddenly exchanging people's information with some other country, often without their permission. So you can start to see this double-edged sword, or this three-pronged problem, that the use by law enforcement and the enthusiasm for innovators to assist law enforcement has to come with this ethical understanding that it's much more complex than you think. And the message I try and send out is, don't think that by helping law enforcement you're necessarily making anything better for trafficked persons. You could in fact be making it worse. You really need to think about data and privacy rights and personal freedom and liberty. Next slide, please. So that third prong, if you like, if it's not a double-edged sword, if it's a fork rather than a knife, we're now thinking about the obstacles and risks for victims. State authorities being mindful to avoid practices that might violate the rights of migrants and trafficked persons, and potentially everybody. We think about surveillance and drones. One way I think about it sometimes is a drone going over a camp in Syria, There's 1 million people in a camp suddenly being subjected to surveillance. Which category do they fall into? So the risks are they're subject to location tracking, data collection, data analysis, access to their data, public surveillance, and then weak justice frameworks that see this as satisfactory. We've got all this technology, let's throw it into court to catch the perpetrators without thinking about how that's affected the trafficked persons and how disclosure by states to traffickers on trial might cause problems to trafficked persons. So there are a range of ways, it seems to me, that you have to think about the way in which technology is used. That's not to say don't investigate, it's investigate smartly. Next slide, please. So we've got to think about being smart in all of these areas, the emerging trends, particularly AI, and the analysis of what is really a criminal law scenario. All of these ways, and I'm not going to read them to you, you can see them there, and I'm sure those people in the team that are going to speak to us later know a great deal more about it than I do, but all of the increasingly more modern ways in which technology can be used and abused has to be thought about when you're seeking to combat human trafficking. Next slide, please. So the conclusion is technologies can be harnessed to prevent, detect, intervene and thwart crimes, but we have to think about how states and law enforcement agencies and private bodies collect, retain and use and harvest information. That can cause real concerns about privacy and personal data. It can create a lack of protection. It can make things worse and add to that dominant strategy of silence, particularly for those persons accused of committing crime by the means and purposes of others. So there's a real tension in the links between human trafficking, cybercrime and smuggling of migrants. That's not to mean that we shouldn't be innovative. And one example that I want to leave you with is some work that I'm doing at the moment on graph theory and modern slavery in corporate supply chains, where you can start to analyze a database full of identity information, but in a way that doesn't reveal all that identity information. In a very simple way, you can think about clusters of information that are then targeted rather than looking at whole database and revealing all of the information within that database. There is one paper of mine out there that on this topic and more to come. So I think it's really important to be innovative, but really important to think of that way in which innovators must think in the 3 ways that I've identified. And the quip, I suppose, that I'm going to leave you with is, are you a hacker or a helper? I'm not sure that encompasses it, but it sounded like a bit of a soundbite. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Felicity. What really struck me was especially also your focus on how technology may enhance our biases, the gender and cultural biases that we have. Thank you so much also for really help us thinking through how technology, what the impact of technology really is, and all the dangers that may arise out of this. Thank you so much. My next question goes to Sebastian. Sebastian, your organization Pasos Libres has been doing really incredible work, especially during the coronavirus. I've bringing together international organizations and criminal justice practitioners, but also universities and students and young professionals. Your most recent data jam that is actually going on at the moment brought together 201 participants from 14 countries, 22 international speakers and 8 partner organizations. So tell us a little bit more about your work and how do you manage to create those partnerships and how those partnerships can help us combat trafficking in persons.
Okay, Martin, thank you for that introduction and for mentioning our last competition. So I will share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So yeah, so basically I would like to provide an overview of the Data Jam. What is the Data Jam Pasos Libres? So the Data Jam Pasos Libres is an international technological competition against modern slavery, an alternative learning scenario to educate the next generation of citizens capable of disrupting human trafficking and forced labor, mainly through innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology. The main point is that we want to transfer knowledge from big organizations actually to young professionals or young students or experts that maybe are not working on the anti-human trafficking field, but that can take action from their own areas of expertise. We created this competition in 2018 in partnership with IBM, and also we have been running different versions with the support of organizations such as UNODC. Actually, the first version here in Colombia was with support of UNODC, and most of the expertise on human trafficking and the mapping of the needs to address in our competition come from UNODC in that first version. Until the moment, today, we have around 4 different competitions, 2 of them local in Colombia, 2 other like international, like the one that you mentioned. And also the format of the competition has been replicated in Brazil, in the United States, and in Canada. Actually, as you know, Martin, you were part of that big competition in Canada. We are really proud of that one because of the solutions, and we are going to hear a little bit more about that with the team of Border Resist after me. Talking about the structure, so how is this competition? What is this competition like? So try to imagine like a friendly competition divided in 4 different phases. So the first one is training. So most of the participants have never addressed before the topic of human trafficking or forced labor, or in general terms, modern slavery. So we have 3 days of, okay, the competition is 10 days competition for the general, our last version. So we have 3 days of training. With different talks and with different experts. So we talk about technology, we talk about specific topics about human trafficking, we talk about design thinking, about how to make a good pitch. Like we provide all the information that the participants need to know and to learn about the challenges of the competition to overcome them. And also we develop a participant handbook, because our goal is also to create like educative material that we can share not just with the participants of our competition, but with other stakeholders interested in the topic. The second phase of the competition is developing a mentorship. So this is like the free time that the participants had to develop their solutions with the support of different mentors. Then we have a time to evaluate the solutions with different experts, and especially the ones that help us to define the challenges and they know really well detect the challenges. And then we have a post-competition development process. This is a pilot program that we are implemented in our international competitions. We had a really good experience with the team that won our last competition. And actually, we continue working with them until today with the support of IBM, the Traffic Analysis Hub, and Pasos Libres. And we are really happy to announce actually that together with the team, we won a place in an acceleration program to develop tech solutions to fight against modern slavery financed by the government of Portugal called Farol. So that's quite interesting how, a group of university students that didn't know about human trafficking before now are participating with other 16 organizations in an accelerated program to develop, solutions to fight against human trafficking. And in that case, the case of that solution, specifically sexual exploitation online.
Well, we can't hear you anymore, Sebastian.
Oh my God.
Just me. Now we can. Yes, now we can.
Oh, okay. So this is an example of the different formats that we have, tried in our competitions. We don't have yet, the results, the final report of our last competition in September. So this is until the last year, but we have tried different formats, 2 days face-to-face competition with 80 participants, then just 1 day competition with a similar number of participants, and some sectors, for example, the tech sector, the nonprofit, international cooperation. And then when we start doing our international competition, we include more participants. So we increase the number to almost 160 participants, and not just from Latin America, but from other countries in the world. We increase the number of the stakeholders, of the partners involved, but not just to say, hey, we have more partners. It's just because we need these different perspectives to make something, that really creates value in the field. So for example, the financial sector, the law enforcement sector, and other sectors that we didn't involve in other versions. Here, like you can see in a better way, like the reach of the competition, the first international competition that we run in 2020. So we reach, of course, many participants in Latin America, but also we reach some participants and some teams in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Tunisia, in Guinea, which is quite interesting. And also our speakers and partners were all around the world. So it's really cool because we are bringing different expertise and different experience from all over the world. And something that I want to highlight is that it is quite interesting that despite of the fact that most of our participants are universities or independent people that want just to learn and to take action, there are, experts from law enforcement. For example, we have the National Police of Colombia, the Bolivian Police, the anti-trafficking division of the Bolivian Police, the Peru Attorney General Office, the Ministry of Government of Ecuador, which is quite interesting actually to have experts participating. And Martin, you know that also in Canada we have a team from Scotiabank, that work in this every day. So it's quite cool how we can attract also, people that is expert on the topic and how it brings value and new learnings also to the participants that have less experience. And in terms of the composition of the teams, we are trying to bring participants from different careers, from different areas of expertise. So here we can see like the interdisciplinarity of the teams. Of course, we have a lot of people that study or is professional in systems engineering, mathematics, physics, information engineering, economy, but also we have a lot of people that is professional or is studying careers more linked to the social science, so law, political science, international business, health and safety, which is a quite cool mix and actually impacts the kind of solutions that they develop. We are trying to keep a balance between gender. Also in Canada, it was really cool because we have a majority of female participants that never happened before. So we are really proud that we achieved that with UNODC and ICPC in Canada. And yeah, this is just a general view of what kind of participants we have in our competitions. And just to close my presentation regarding the question of how Pasos Libres managed to create that partnerships is a quite really good question, because it's something that you start doing, but you never think how you are doing that. So actually, I thought in that question in the previous week, and I find like 4 ways or 4 tips that have helped Pasos Libres to create that partnerships, and that I really believe that if there are other young organizations in this conference trying to do the same, not necessarily in the anti-human trafficking field, but working in other SDGs, it can be really helpful. And I think that the question is interesting because Pasos Libres was born in 2018. We are a really young organization of young people in Colombia that started in this with no money and no much contacts in the anti-trafficking field. And now we are working with huge organizations with expertise and years working on this field, such as UNODC or the International Labour Organization or IBM, for example, which I think that it's quite interesting. So the first point is collaborate to learn, share, and create. So in our first competition, we weren't looking for funding. Of course, we need it, and we still needed it. But the point is that we were looking to learn. We have a vision. We wanted to create a competition to bring young people and experts, but we didn't know how to do it. And IBM was an expert doing this, so we really started looking for partners that can, teach us how to do it. And obviously, we want to share with them our vision, our experience, working with young people. And the purpose of this was to create something. We are not just asking for learnings, or we are not just asking our partners to teach us something without a purpose, but the purpose is to create something. And I think that that's really attractive for the partners, to share your knowledge, to share what you know with a concrete goal that is create, in this case, a competition, but also we can create a new handbook, we can create a new methodology, we can use a new platform. So that's the point. The second is to find a problem and become a solver. So there are many problems and many challenges out there when we talk about human trafficking. There are some of them that are super complex, some of them that are easier to solve. And in our case, we found that there are not many education of quality about human trafficking and forced labor outside formal environments, outside universities. So we wanted to create these alternative learning scenarios and obviously promote and help to innovate in the field. And we found that the solution was to create these kind of competitions and start bringing different elements of the design thinking and the social innovation camps model. So, become a solver, it's important. Obviously, there are big problems, there are small problems, but try to solve something. The third one is establish a long-term shared purpose. So since 2018, our purpose wasn't to create just one competition. We wanted to create the most important competition to fight against modern slavery in the world. And when you have a shared purpose and when you share that with your partners, also you start creating long-term relationships with them. And that's the point. We really need to keep working with them. We don't want to work with them just 1 year. We need to develop this trust and to continue transferring knowledge and improving the way we do the things. And the fourth and last point is to fulfill your commitments. So accomplish what you say to your partners that you was going to achieve, and obviously evolve fast. So we learned that about from IBM. So there is no a final project, never. It's just another and a better prototype that you can improve every year. And that's what we continue to do with the data jam. Add new details, change the challenges, change some data, or bring a new platform, create a better handbook, include a new topic. That's the main point about this. Ever evolve to create more value. That's I think the most important about how Pasos Libres have managed to create those partnerships, and I hope this maybe works for other organizations as well. and thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. I think it's very interesting what you said about bringing knowledge to the ground, and I think these competitions and these partnerships that you are creating have lasting effects not only on the people that participated in them, but also by the way acceleration of the people's by resist that we're going to hear in a minute from the use that spread that knowledge as well, and also with the creation of those partnerships. I think a lot of what you do is very long lasting, and thank you so much for your intervention for this. I'm going to go now to Buyers Resist and have a question for them. So first of all, as I mentioned, they won the competition that we organized in Canada, the first nationwide virtual tech competition that we held. And today I would like to ask you the question, and I think Jared and Matthew will be responding first, and then Brian will be responding. So I want to ask you, can you explain what your solution that you developed does? What was your approach? But in a second way, also how and why did you engage in combating human trafficking in the first place?
First off, just on behalf of the whole team, I just love to say a big thank you, Martin, for having us. Thank you for your work, and Sebastian, you as well. Thank you for the work that you're doing and for putting on the competition. Felicity, you're an inspiration as well. Thank you for what you're doing, and also to everyone who's involved in organizing this Knowledge Week. And also just a particular big thank you to everyone who has showed up today to this session. Thank you for being interested, for getting informed, and especially for the actions that you will take after today. So Jared, you wanna kick it off?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Good morning, and thanks, Martin. So to answer your question, our approach started quite boldly. We wanted to create a screen monitoring application that could block youth from sending and receiving exploitative images. But this idea failed. This idea would require collaboration with OS creators like Apple or Google. But Apple saw our idea and decided to introduce it on their own platform for us. Jokes aside, we scraped various data from escort listings all across Canada, which meant about 70,000 different ads in our project. And then we ran this data through an AI engine to look for similarities in postings. Our scrapers were flexible, meaning we were able to scrape an arbitrary set of features depending on what the page offered publicly. Our assumption for this event is that pimps or people who sell sex are lazy and will use similar language and post style for different escorts. This would lead us to narrow down on who we think could be caught in a sexual exploitation ring. We also built a website that allows users to search all of our scraped listings, see similar postings that we found with our algorithm, and then allows users to search and filter by any of the attributes that we scraped. Using IBM's Watson Discovery, we were also able to analyze sentiment on escort review boards, which is where sex buyers review their experience with escorts. Along with this, we could accomplish some deeper dives on the data from these forms, looking for suspicious activity associated with certain keywords. This tool enabled us to find some comments from sex buyers that indicated the escorts were trapped in a sexually exploitative relationship with a pimp. As this project is just a proof of concept, it's important to nail down its limitations. The dataset we used was relatively small, as we're sure there are many more thousands or hundreds of thousands of postings on the web that could help narrow down our results. AI generally works better when you feed it more data, as you all are probably aware. This hackathon with Pasos Libres was fun for me personally, and I'm sure for the rest of the team too, as hackathons always give me a way to learn new things in a safe environment. There's no marks lost like in a classroom setting, and you learn from your teammates when you're all in the same high intensity environment. I learned from Matthew how to create a web scraper with Beautiful Soup, which is a Python library. If it weren't for this project, I probably would have never thought of the ways I could use code to extract data from the internet like this. For our time with Pasos Libres, it forced us to become better programmers, but at the same time, this unique environment working on sexual exploitation revealed to me how technical skill could be used ethically instead of just empowering a mega corporation's quarterly profits. Personally, I was drawn to this event because of two things: my friendship with Brian and my own interest in actually making a difference in this unfortunate market in the world. If it wasn't for our friendship, I would have never found out about this event, and I suspect this might be the same for many young developers around the world, passionate about fighting sexual exploitation, but no real outlet to make a difference besides maybe donating to a charity. This project brought me to life as it actually put some of the power back in my own hands to actually help fight this issue. I would hope that this panel here and the strings it could pull could do more than just fund the ideas more, but bring more hands on deck to fight the issues we see around us and utilize the power of youth in our favor.
Awesome, thanks, Jared.
Yeah.
So my story of getting engaged in combating human trafficking began a few years ago when my life was disrupted by an introduction to the reality of human trafficking in the world today. I was so stunned by the enormous figures of modern day slavery and knew that I could not go on pretending it didn't exist, but that I had to do something about it. At the time, I was still in high school, and after asking several experts in the anti-trafficking space about the need to abolish human trafficking, I kept hearing lawyers. So I began working towards a law degree, but here in Canada, that's a 7-year process, and I was sort of becoming impatient about waiting until I was qualified to begin helping the cause. So I just began volunteering for several anti-trafficking organizations. As I got deeper and deeper into this space, I eventually realized that this issue would never be solved and human trafficking would never be abolished as long as there was a demand side to the trafficking equation. In other words, as long as there are people willing to and capable of paying to abuse and exploit vulnerable populations. And a lot of our work was on sex trafficking, and so especially women and children were the victims of this crime. And seeing that there really wasn't much in the form of combating this demand, I began trying to build my own tools. So you heard from my colleague Jared about the solution we built during the data jam, and I'd like to just briefly share with you some of these other tools that we've been working on. Earlier this year, we registered ByResist as a nonprofit and built a website that educates men on the consequences of purchasing sex and the reality of the human trafficking industry. Thanks to a grant from Google for ad spend, we've been able to reach thousands of men each month with this message, and we seem to get emails from men every single day asking for help to overcome their sexual addiction, and many of these men who are contributors to the sex trafficking industry. The tool that we are currently working on is called Wilbur. It's an artificial intelligence powered chatbot that communicates with sex buyers and takes them on a journey of understanding the legal consequences of purchasing sex, the health consequences, the impact on communities and survivors, the reality of the sex trafficking industry, and finally refers them to resources to get help from their addiction and decision making. Wilbur has had hundreds of conversations with buyers already, and we're just so extremely excited about continuing to fine tune it and to scale it to reach sex buyers all over the world. If you're wondering, Wilbur received its name as an homage to William Wilberforce, who was one of the principal abolitionists of the slave trade in the 1800s. As Felicity shared and is absolutely right about, we have to be really careful in the work that we're doing with all these tools and how we store and use the data that we're collecting. So yeah, I now find myself in my final year of law school, working with developers, marketing experts, project managers, researchers, you name it. And while the experts that I questioned in high school were right about the need for lawyers in this space, as you can see by the awesome work that Felicity is doing as an example, I've really come to realize that we need everyone. So whatever your skills are, there is a role for you in this movement, and I plead with you to consider taking a part. Matthew, I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so on that note of kind of everyone having a part, human trafficking is something that I've cared about for a while, but it's something that I didn't know how to get involved in. Like Jared, Brian invited me to this data jam, and I was really excited. It was finally a way to combine my skills as a developer and my passion for fighting human trafficking. And I want to also encourage you that I think there's a lot of people like me and Jared who care about this, who kind of know superficially about this problem and have skills that can contribute, but they don't know how to actually use them and leverage them. When I talked to my friends about participating in this, I got tons of really interested feedback. People who were excited for me, but then a lot of people who were asking, like, where did you find out about this? Like, what are you working on? And seemed to really be motivated to get involved themselves. And I think that we just need more accessible on-ramps, programs like this where people can realize, oh, like my skills can actually make a difference. How can I actually leverage them? So these projects that we worked on are really fun and exciting. But no matter how kind of our specific project ends up or how this bioresist goes, I think the hackathon and this data jam was a really exciting opportunity because it allowed us to learn about the sexual exploitation. As Sebastian was talking about, there was lessons, and it kind of opened up, at least for me, a new imagining of what's possible with technology in a way that I hadn't really considered before. In university, I participated in and heard about many hackathons, basically all sponsored by large tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Expedia. And as fun as those were, I think they set a paradigm where we imagine technology as a way to increase profits, as Jared said. And as exciting as the projects are, when they're sponsored by big tech companies and they're kind of open-ended like that, you kind of imagine what you see around you. And it actually narrows your imagined realm of possibilities. And so I think programs like this, where there's an explicit goal of actually doing good in the world, broadens those horizons. And particularly for young people, it helps them imagine ways where they can positively impact the world with their skills instead of just working for Amazon or Microsoft or a tech company in the future. I also think it's an incredible opportunity to partner with organizations that need coders, but also people in different fields and partner them with them. Whether that's for salaried work or even for volunteers. And I know that Brian has done some really good work with some organizations here in Vancouver where people are really motivated to help out. And that's where, while funding is still light, being able to get help to actually get technical expertise to work on these projects. So yeah, I don't think that these kinds of programs are limited to hackathons. That's part of what I'm thinking about in the realm that I'm in, and I think the data jam kind of falls within that. But yeah, I would love to see more programs that create accessible on-ramps for young people to become involved in leveraging their talents to fight human trafficking. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and I'm really appreciated that I was able to participate in one recently.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you to everybody from the team bioresist. I actually noted two things that I wanted to highlight. Using the laziness of the traffickers to unveil an organized criminal group. So actually to one of the comments that Felicity put there, actually the technology does differentiate between people that are offering legal sex work and people that are involved or exploited in an organized criminal group. So I think this was a very interesting or innovative approach to dealing with the question. And the second thing I noted down was seeing that there was no tool that combated the demand of sex trafficking, I just built one myself. I think it really shows the innovative power that young people, especially the bias resist people, are generally people that we met during the entire data jam in Canada that we did, just showing the incredible capacities that is out there that we're really trying to harness for this. We have about 10 minutes left, and I would like to ask one more question, and I would like to ask the speakers to be as briefly as possible. The next week, the United Nations Working Group on Trafficking in Persons will be discussing successful strategies for addressing the use of technology to facilitate trafficking in persons and to prevent and investigate trafficking in persons. What are some of the elements that you would like to feature in this resolution? Specifically, for example, also to bias resist, what are some of the obstacles that you have faced, or what is preventing you now to go further with your solution, and how can UN member states actually help you in this process? So I would like to give the floor first to Felicity, if I may. I think you are still muted, Felicity.
Hold on, try again. I did press it.
Yes.
Maybe I pressed twice. Look, that's a huge question. I think that the female perspective is really important to me. That so often there is a stigma for the woman who is the trafficked person, or the woman who is the trafficked person who commits crime. So in the context of innovation, I think what the innovation has to do is see a lot of what it's trying to do from a woman's perspective. It's why I put you got to sort out the difference between sex work and sex trafficking in the chat. I love that you were harvesting the comments below the web pages to see what the reactions were. I think that's great. So I think for me, it's about seeing the woman's perspective in these things, which allows you to then move to that, well, are we harming? Are we helping? Are we harming? Are we preventing? Are we causing? What is it that's creating the dominant strategy here? Maybe what I'm really saying is start looking at crime from a defense perspective. You're nearly always defending people when they're victims, particularly if they're smuggled migrants. If you start investigating from a defense perspective, you're going to take a more holistic approach. The other one that I would add is, I think there's an untapped area for innovation in the overlap between organised crime and modern slavery and corporate supply chains, particularly in the context of corruption and bribery. There's a real, I hate the phrase grey area, but there's a real untapped area that is what's the difference? What's the difference between corporate exploitation and organised crime? I would say none. It's all criminal activity. So I think this type of innovative technology can be used in the context of corporate analysis of supply chains. And of course, the UK and Australia have requirements for corporate reporting in supply chains. And I think data analysis going forward is going to be part of that corporate business and human rights responsibility.
Thank you so much, Felicity. Sebastian, thoughts?
Okay, well, I think that there are several interesting tech initiatives to combat human trafficking all around the world, and in different levels. Someone that are starting, someone that are super, complex and are being implemented in different countries. But at least then all of these different solutions have different needs in terms of implementation or the technology or funding. And I have seen some programs that provide funding like to these kind of initiatives, but I think that it is necessary to create more accelerator programs, not just provide funding, but actually that have a more comprehensive like training process. So, for example, the idea, and I completely agree with Matthew that we need more programs like this. The point is not just to provide money to develop something without any sense, but actually to get closer the startups or the non-profits or the companies or the organizations that are working to develop technology to combat human trafficking with the experts on human trafficking. And that's only possible when they work together in a kind of accelerator program where not just the money is important, but also the knowledge that you transmit to them, because that's the opportunity actually to fix many maybe mistakes, or to redirectionate, the purpose of the solution, or to increase the probability that that solution is going to be implemented and is going to have a real impact. So it would be nice to have and to see more of those programs where not just the money, but also the knowledge is important and is the core, to the really develop technology that can have a real impact.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. And I think I give it to Brian, who will be responding on behalf of Team Bioresist. Brian?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, I'd say you're on a really good track. You've done the research. You know that this issue has massive economic costs. You know it's the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. The UN's Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime has already come up with a 4-pillared approach: prevention, protection of victims, prosecution of offenders, and working in partnerships. You're having a knowledge week on it right now. You're coming together. So I think you're on a good track. In addition to what the others have shared, I think 3 things should be highlighted during the working group discussion. The first is prosecution. Criminal justice systems are imperative to addressing human trafficking, and I think have been seriously neglected. While it is recognized that prosecution is a fundamental pillar to combating trafficking, I don't see it being enforced nearly anywhere. It seems that offenders and perpetrators get away with these crimes all over the world with near complete impunity and very, very little fear of getting caught. And even when they are caught, it seems the sentences are measly. And I think that's a huge issue. The second is funding. Funders understandably like to fund what they can measure. They want to see their dollars being put to good use and making a difference. The reality is that human trafficking is much harder to measure than a lot of other issues. It happens behind closed doors. It's one of the few crimes that very few of its victims ever report the abuse, even when they get a chance to, because they have historically been shamed and victimized even further when they do so. So I believe this cause really deserves so much more funding than it's receiving, and I hope that the difficulty of measuring it will not continue to prevent funding to go towards it. And I know for us that would be, a huge help to scaling the tools that we're building. And the third is collaboration. Like Matthew shared earlier, and like Sebastian has been sharing, let's continue to create programs, hackathons, other on-ramps to get young people and everyone involved in leveraging their talents towards the cause, and thereby also becoming educated about these issues.
Thank you so much, Brian. And with this, I will start my closing. Thank you so much, first of all, to all the panelists. I think it was an incredibly interesting discussion on all the different aspects on how technology is hampering innovation, but also how innovation can help us in these combating all these crimes, both trafficking in persons and also smuggling of migrants. Before closing, I would like to highlight a very important launch that that's going to happen next Monday. I think my colleagues have already put the link in the chat. Next Monday, UNODC is launching the compendium on promising practices fostering public-private partnerships to prevent and counter trafficking in persons. It's a compendium, if I remember correctly, that was put together with participation of over 50 states, with participation of over 60 private corporations as well. So I think it's a very comprehensive compendium. If you would like to participate, the link is in the chat already now. I would also take the opportunity to thank Public Safety Canada. Public Safety Canada was the funder of our data jam against exploitation in Canada. We would really like to highlight that we really appreciate this funding because it allowed us to do a lot of innovative and new work that we were not able to do before. It was also a possibility to us to create and, as we said, to bring to the ground knowledge in the Canadian context, develop technologies that are specifically tailored to the Canadian context as well, but also to create partnerships that are lasting in this in the Canadian society as well. So thank you so much, Public Safety Canada. Last but not least, I would like to remind everybody that we also shared the evaluation sheet. We would really greatly appreciate if you could fill out the few questions that we have there. As we mentioned, this is the first time that we do Knowledge Week, and we would like to make the best out of it, also to learn from our mistakes, but also to see what you like, what you didn't like. So if you have a minute of your time, we would really appreciate if you could fill out the evaluation sheet. Last but not least, please join us tomorrow when we end Knowledge Week with an event on making it work, a discussion on the complexities arising when turning from theory to practice and ways to overcome such challenges by using case law from around the world. So focusing on case law and prosecutions of trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. Thank you so much. And with this, I am 1 minute too late. I apologize for this 1 minute. And hope you have all a good day, a good afternoon, and a good night. And thank you again, everybody, for joining today.